Welcome back to Comic Book History, Episode 6. Excuse me. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about the Midnight Suns imprint, which existed from August of 1992, and it was discontinued in of 1994, existing for exactly 2 years. Now, this crossover this particular imprint was started thanks to a crossover that Howard Mankey and Adam Kubert started with the there was this crossover known as Rise of the Midnight Suns. And the Midnight Suns is a group of supernatural characters formed by Doctor Strange to take on Lilith and a bunch of other supernatural threats. Simply put, you can kind of see them as a 90s version of the Defenders. And pretty much the group was overall consisted of, let's see here, was this a group series? It was consisted of a few different characters per se. It consisted of the Johnny Blaze, the original, the first Ghost Rider, Johnny Blaze, who was not Ghost Rider at that moment. He was simply just Johnny Blaze. There was also Dan Ketch, who was the current Ghost Rider, along with Michael Morbius, Hannibal King, Frank Drake, Blade the Vampire Hunter, Doctor Strange, obviously, along with Victoria Missoni, Louise Hastings, Sam Butchen, Mordred the Mystic, and Jinx. Yep, Jinx. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, when this crossover, now the crossover itself started a handful of titles. Ghost Rider was already established at this point, going on for a little over 2 years, and Howard Mankey did it. Now, some of you might recognize the name Adam Kubert as being the brother of Andy Kubert and the son of legendary comic book artist Joe Kubert, and they're still working to this very day with Adam Kubert. Well, he was doing all new, all different Avengers. Now it's it's the artist from Weird World who's doing the Avengers book by Mark Waid. Now, when they started out the Midnight Suns line, aside from Ghost Rider, they launched Spirits of Vengeance, Morbius, the Living Vampire, that's what the title was called, Darkhold for the Pages of Sin, and Night Stalkers. Yes. Now, of these titles, Morbius, which was the longest running title of these books, also Spirits of Vengeance, that one lasted for 32 issues. Spirits of Vengeance lasted for 22 issues. Night Stalkers lasted for 18 issues. Darkhold from the Pages of Sin, that lasted for 16 issues. And plus there was one other comic book they launched. This comic book, which I had the first issue of, Midnight Suns Unlimited. Simply put, this was an anthology series that was part of the same thing. Basically, it functioned the same way as Spider-Man Unlimited, coming out quarterly. And unlike Spider-Man Unlimited, which lasted 22 issues over the course of a little over 5 years, this one lasted for 9 issues over the course of a little over 2 years. And it would range from various stories featuring people who are associated with Midnight Suns, like this issue right here. Feature stories with Dan Ketch, Johnny Blaze, Darkhold, Night Stalkers, Morbius. There's also stories featuring Blade, Man-Thing, anybody who's generally part of the Midnight Suns or associated with them. According to Doctor Strange, in the context of the stories, this was the second order of the Midnight Suns. Yes. Now, Rise of the Midnight Suns was one of 3 crossovers they had over the course of the entire line. The second crossover happened almost a year after the line started, called Midnight Massacre, where Blade became a being known as the Daywalker. It itself lasted for a little while. It wasn't as long as it was one issue shorter than Rise of Midnight Suns. Now, Midnight Massacre took up issue 10 of Night Stalkers, issue 40 of Ghost Rider Volume 3, issue 11 of of Darkhold, 12 of Michael Morbius Living Vampire, and issue 13 of Spirits of Vengeance. Now, Spirits of Vengeance will be part of not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 crossovers. Rise of Midnight Suns, Midnight Massacre, Spirits of Venom, I am not kidding about this, the Road to Vengeance, The Missing Link, and Siege of Darkness. 5 crossovers over the course of 2 years. You gotta praise the title for doing that. And I think that it was written by Howard Mink, if not mistaken. Let me here. I believe I have his document here, if I'm not mistaken. There he is. Now, pretty much he was the one who set up this entire thing in the first place. Now, there was also a series, I should point out, for, Blade, which was launched after the cancellation of the Night Stalker series. There was a couple series for Johnny Blaze called one with Blaze, the other one was like Blaze Legacy of Blood. Basically, they were canceled due to low sales, along with pretty much the entire imprint itself. Now, I've read pretty much almost the entire line, most of the entire line. Now, at one point during the actual line, Doctor Strange Sorcerer Supreme was added as part of the actual line. Of course, let's see, Spirits of Vengeance. No, he did not write the title. It was somebody else who wrote the book. Yeah, it was somebody else, but he did write Blaze Legacy of Blood, which is a 4-issue limited series. Now, the reason why Marvel ended the line is because they were suffering from low sales, and this was during a period of time when the speculator boom collapsed. This is around the mid-90s when this imprint collapsed. But as somebody who has read pretty much everything associated with this imprint, oh yeah, I almost forgot. They also had briefly Marvel Comics Presents part of the imprint, simply because it was part of the because the fact was crossing over with Siege of Darkness. It functioned. Marvel Comics pretty much. Midnight Suns and Marvel Comics kind of function the same way. Similarly, it's just an anthology book featuring various characters, though Midnight Suns Unlimited featured characters who are part of the Midnight Suns or associated with them. Marvel Comics Presents pretty much featured everybody from the Marvel Universe and have an ongoing series. But, yeah. But, in my honest opinion, well, the thing with this whole entire imprint is that only one thing has been collected from it, and that's the Rise of Midnight Suns crossover. That 6-part storyline has been collected in trade once. I am not kidding about this. It was collected in one trade. A trade that came out, I don't know, a few years ago maybe? Yeah. But, despite the fact that this is sort of a forgotten imprint per se, but when the imprint ceased, now the first thing that ceased with this whole entire imprint was Darkhold from the Pages of Sin. That was ceased with Siege of Darkness. It was by far the biggest crossover of the entire imprint. And do you know how long this crossover was? This crossover was 17 parts. Yeah, it consists of all of the entire imprint. Though here's the weird thing. Doctor Strange, Sorcerer Supreme, and Ghost Rider would last for, Ghost Rider managed to last for a few more years, or at least for a little over 4 years. Actually, it lasted for almost 50 issues after this crossover ended. Doctor Strange, Sorcerer Supreme would last for a few more years. Marvel Comics Presents would last for about another year before the comic got canceled. Night Stalkers. This managed to last for a few more months before this was discontinued. Now, what the Night Stalker series was simply a sort of a supernatural private detective agency consisted of Blade the Vampire Hunter, Hannibal King, who is a vampire, and of course Frank Drake. Now there's a few things these three characters have in common. One, they're all created by the late Gene Colan. Two, they all made the first appearance in the pages of Tomb of Dracula, which, by the way, the Minotaurs actually fought Dracula a couple times. Plus, they actually fought something that was not supernatural. They actually fought Dreadnought from Hydra. Yes, they actually fought Hydra, something that's not supernatural. The Darkhold pages of simply was a book. That was the focus of the series of Darkhold, which Jerry Conway, who actually was the writer of that book, brought the thing back, and plus the character Victoria, who was the general focus character of that series, brought those two back in his Carnage series, which is going to wrap up pretty soon next month. As for Michael Morbius himself, he would pop up now and again after the conclusion of his own series, popping up mainly in the pages of a Spider-Man book and occasionally in Blade. His most recent appearance, as far as I know, was 3 years ago when he once again had his own brief ongoing series that was quickly canceled after 9 issues. It was by far the first title canceled from the Marvel Now lineup that started back in 2012. While everything else continued perfectly fine, this one was quickly canceled because no one cared, from what I can tell. It is by far, I mean, really? Everything else continues perfectly fine, but Morbius can't have an ongoing series? Heck, the trade collects all 9 issues plus the backdoor pilot issue, which is from 699.1. They threw that in there as well. I guess they were just desperate, throwing anything in it. Blade himself will continue to be a presence in the Marvel Universe, especially this very day. I believe his most recent appearance was actually in the weekly series Wolverines. That, as far as I can tell, was his most recent appearance. Though the character himself, after the conclusion of Minotaur's Imprint, would try many times over the course of 15 years. Marvel tried to give him something of his own. Like, they tried ongoing series. A lot of them failed. He's had miniseries. Those have been most successful. He's had miniseries, one-shots, some of whom actually written by his actual creators, Marv Wolfman and Gene Colan. There was a new Blade ongoing series that was supposed to come out last year, but it has been delayed. The series was written by Tim Seeley, of all people. Yeah, the guy who writes Nightwing and was the creator of the Hack Slash series. He was going to write Blade, which was not a bad idea. Of course, the guy also he also comes out with the Lost Boys series. I would have loved it, and the premise was that Blade somehow discovered he had a daughter, probably from the various women he slept with. But apparently, some people, I have this revolving theory of any time Blade is in a comic book, it's a curse. Though Tomb of Dracula is the exception because Marv Wolfman wrote it. Wrote all of his appearances in that book. But this isn't the case with a couple times I've seen this happen, where Blade is in a book and the book gets canceled not long after he appears in the book. Like in the case of Captain Britain MI13. He shows up in issue 5. I think it's issue 5, and the book gets canceled 7 issues later. He shows up in the Wolverines, and that comic ends like a few months after and that weekly series gets abruptly canceled. I'm hoping he gets an ongoing series again. Let's see. As for Dan Ketch, after the conclusion of his series, the character disappeared for over a decade before returning in the pages of Jason Aaron's run for Ghost Rider, which led into a miniseries which wrapped up his run. Basically, he made a deal with a character named Zaral, I think his name is. Basically, Jason Aaron retconned it where this angel was one who gave Johnny Blaze Zorthos. That's the demon that turns Ghost Rider in Johnny Blaze into Ghost Rider. Dan Ketch is the spirit of vengeance, but it's not a demon that possesses it. It's basically the motorcycle. Doctor Strange got an ongoing series now. Let's see. Frank Drake and Hannibal King have barely been heard of. They barely have shown up in the Marvel Universe since the conclusion of Night Stalkers. Usually they make occasional appearances, maybe in the pages of Blade or somewhere. Johnny Blaze himself still shows up in the Marvel Universe, but his most recent appearance, off the top of my head, was actually in the Thunderbolt series. Not the current one, the previous line that went into about 2 years ago. That's his most recent appearance I can think of. But some of the characters are still very much around. I should also point out the Midnight Suns was revived as part of the Marvel Zombies line. For at least one comic book they had called Midnight Suns. They were brought back at the end of Marvel Zombies 3, and the lot smaller than this one. This lineup consisted of Michael Morbius, Damien Hillstrom, Jennifer Kale, Man-Thing, and Wear It by Night. After the conclusion of Marvel Zombies 4, this incarnation, which I think is the third incarnation of Midnight Suns, has not appeared since this miniseries concluded. It was a team that was associated with the organization Armor. They deal with alternate realities, which the She-Hulk, the one from an alternate reality, the one who's the daughter of the Hulk and Thundera, she was an agent of them, and she has gone to another dimension. She's not been heard from since. Though they did show her at the end of Gary Duggan when somehow she's killing monsters now. But all in all, Midnight Suns is one of those things that either Marvel doesn't care about basically acknowledging it exists, or they just simply just don't care, or they just want to just hide it. They think they're I'm not sure what Marvel's actual attitude toward this imprint is, because as far as I know, there has been 0 trades, but the only kind of trade that's been released was Spirits of Venom. And that was the only thing released aside from Rise of Midnight Suns. And that was a trade that collected the actual crossover Spirits of Venom, which was a crossover between Spirits of Vengeance and Whip of Spider-Man. It was a 4-part crossover. The Dan Ketch Ghost Rider series, Marvel has started to put that in trade, but I think they stopped after one book. It's called Dan Ketch Ghost Rider Classic, and it only collects the first 10 issues. Despite the fact the volume itself lasted for 93 issues, they had not done much anything else with it. Though they have brought back the Ghost Rider as an ongoing series, but it doesn't feature Dan Ketch nor Johnny Blaze. It features the third Flamehead Ghost Rider, Robbie Reyes, who first showed up in the all-new Ghost Rider series that was launched in, I believe it was 2013, but was canceled after 12 issues. Now, the series itself was fine. I didn't have a problem with it. It was a great series. And, of course, the character essentially showed up in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which he's done really well, and I'm glad the fact they cast an Hispanic actor to play him. But, all in all, I do highly recommend you track down not only this series, which is only 9 issues, but also track down the Darko Pages of Sin, Night Stalkers, the Morbius series. It is really good, by the way. Pretty much anything associated with this imprint. And yes, I definitely do recommend tracking down the Marvel Comics Presents issues, and of course Doctor Strange vs. Supreme. Read all 90 issues. You'll basically do it. You'll love it. It just from your perspective of it. But yeah, that's it for this episode. Stay tuned for the next episode, which is episode 7. And I'm going to be talking about the Marvel Max imprint. An imprint that's still around, but Marvel has done jack squat with it because Disney bought them. I'll talk about that in the next episode when I get to it. But until then, I will see you there. Bye.